Good morning, everybody, and I'd like to start maybe a thank you to all of the people here from IS Cubed. What a great welcome last night. Those fireworks, how about that, huh? I think I'm going to have a little bit of a problem going through the gunpowder residue at the airport, but nevertheless, maybe some tones of smoke on the water coming off the wave pool. It was quite awe-inspiring and a great way to kick things off. So this morning, we're going to talk not only about Aviva and where we've come over the last year since we were last gathered in Drakensberg a year ago. Not only are we going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about digital transformation and how to get going. What experience have we had over the last year as we've combined this organization, this new company, and what delight and what benefits have we brought some different customers along the way. So really, when we look at Aviva and what we've created over the last year since the transaction between Aviva and Schneider Electric software, we've really come up with a portfolio that's got 5 main pillars, but at the end of the day, it represents end-to-end digital twin. We're not talking about a tiny point solution that does one cool little thing. We're talking about end-to-end, right from the initial design of an asset all the way through long-term operations and maintenance. So let's go around the circle. Let's look at the 5 pillars, and then we'll get into some more detail as we go forward. The first of the 5 pillars, of course, engineering, procurement, and construction. So this is where the Heritage Aviva organization was really, really strong. This is the core capability that they bring to the table when designing in 3D in a integrated environment. So multiple disciplines, all collaborating into the same design platform, and with that, saving money at each step of the way, making sure that changes are coordinated, making sure that changes happen in the design phase where they're least expensive, as opposed to making them happen in the field where they're most expensive. And you'll see a couple of people in a keynote in about an hour or two go into some detail. David Bleakley will go into some detail along with others to really break down this part of the portfolio that those of you who have been coming to this event for the last few years might not have the same visibility to that part of our portfolio. So we're going to give you a bit of a treat this morning and unpack that a little bit. The next one as we go around the circle is asset performance. And it's unfortunate that Kim Cousteau isn't here because she's really the expert that around that particular part of our portfolio. But imagine a situation now where we've created a digital twin in the design phase of our project. And now, rather than sort of handing that over at the time of commissioning, now we're going to use that same information. We're not going to have to redo it. We're going to use that same information, bring an asset context to it, how that asset is behaving, some of the spare parts associated with that asset, some of the standard operating procedures associated with that asset. How do we maintain that asset? How do we make sure that we eke every bit of performance out of that asset that we can, leveraging the digital twin that we created back in the design phase. Continuing to move around, we see monitoring and control. And our friends here from IS Cubed really know this space. And this is where, as Aviva, we have the largest installed base, the largest market share. This is where we really do some wonderful things. And I really encourage you to go to the expo hall and see some of the new things and how we've applied them over the last year since we met here the last time. Next one down, we see planning and scheduling. So now it's not enough just to be great in the plant. And we are great collectively in the plant. Now we have to look at the whole value chain. What affects the plant in terms of upstream? What affects it in terms of downstream, on the demand side? And how do we optimize everything coming in, everything going out, to maximize profitability, and to make sure that we're doing so as efficiently as possible. Then last but not least, we see the operate and optimize. And these are some of those core manufacturing execution systems, mining operations management systems, and some of the tools that we use to actually get every piece of process capability out of that value stream. So if it's advanced process control, if it's different real-time optimization tools, if it's downtime analysis and delay accounting systems, all of that falls into that portion of our portfolio. And as you can see, we're covering the entire life cycle of the plant. So, really, just to summarize what I've just gone through, we see the asset life cycle. We also see the operations life cycle. And in the engineering, procurement, and construction side of this model, we've delivered value in the order of sort of 10 million in savings on every 100 million project, $100 million project. So that's, you can expect a 10% savings on CapEx from a large project. Similarly, from an asset performance perspective, we see a 20% increase in equipment utilization associated with some of the different offers within our asset performance management portfolio. Moving over to the operations side, which is generally a little more associated with OpEx than it is CapEx on the asset side. Through planning and scheduling and operate and optimize, we see similar kinds of savings, though they tend to be more from a manufacturing cost elimination or reduction, and also from an increase in actual production and the value of that production, reduction of loss through quality, those kinds of things. And right in the middle, once again, we see monitoring and control, that core piece of our overall portfolio that brings everything together. So, over the last year, what have we put together in AVEVA? You can see we have a little over 4,000 employees across maybe 70 locations around the world. This slide says around 700 million pounds of revenue. We'll do well over that as we are poised to finish our fiscal year here in another 2 weeks' time. About 1,000 people in R&D, and 16% of our overall sales we pour back into that R&D. I'm pretty proud of what we've accomplished over the last year. Through all the integration that we've gone through between the two companies, we've still managed to pull together and integrate some of the key portions of both of those value chains that I talked about on the previous slide, to pull them together to actually start delivering that value in 12 short months. It's also important that we're not viewed as the company that has some pretty interesting software tools, but they're sort of getting long in the tooth. That's absolutely the wrong view of reality. 85% of that R&D spend that I just talked about, 85% of it gets poured back into our next-gen offers. So as we migrate different applications to the cloud, as we continue to pour money into native cloud-based applications, as we start to tie together different aspects of our portfolio in that new cloud-based platform, whether it happened to be monitoring and control, whether it happened to be asset performance, we're starting to see something sort of ubiquitous, and as end users, you can turn on different aspects of the same basic platform. So again, make sure that you spend some time in the booths next door and actually look at these things firsthand. You can see AVEVA's a 50-year-old company and trusted by all of the big brands around the world. We do this at scale. This isn't some interesting little experiment. We do it at scale, and our greater than 700 million pounds worth of sales in a year sort of speaks to that. You've seen these kinds of things before, whether it was Ravi, whether it was Rob McGreevy. We have our different software titles deployed at 100,000 sites around the world. We're processing 10 trillion industrial transactions every day. We're monitoring 20 billion industrial parameters and storing something in the neighborhood of 12,000 terabytes of information every year. So, we see a third of the world's plants using our tools to drive value in their businesses. 19 of the top 20 oil and gas companies, 22 of the top 40 chemical companies, and so on and so on and so on. 90% of the top 20 EPC companies. So you can see that connection of design through to how we want to operate that facility and bringing those two ends together. And the only company in the world that has the capability to do that. Some of the value that we're delivering for our customers and in terms of both profitability and return on capital. Again, lots of proof points here to underscore. This isn't a joke. This is real. This is now. Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit and move towards some of the trends we're seeing in the industry, and then what those trends mean to you. I don't think it matters what industry you come from, whether you're here from the mining industry, M, whether you're here from oil and gas, whether you're here from consumer packaged goods, food and bev, life sciences, whether you're here from the water industry. We have a market environment that is constantly applying greater and greater pressure to our businesses, whether it's in the form of commodity prices, whether it's in the form of competition or consolidation in the industry, whether it's around regulatory concerns, whether it's environmental, quality, safety, those types of things. In a lot of the jurisdictions where many of you have come from, to meet with us here for the next couple of days, we see geopolitical uncertainties in different regions around the world, and this pervasive sort of generation shift where in the past your father might have worked in a plant in a facility for 30 years, 35 years, got the gold watch, but what's next? And will you or your kids, will they work in the same place for 35 years? Chances are maybe not. Will they work in a remote mindset or in a remote mine site for 35 years? Maybe not. So how do we address this skill shortage? How do we make sure people are trained up to speed, working safely, working efficiently, being productive in a much shorter period of time? They won't have 10 years to learn that role because on average, they will change jobs every 2.7 years. So how do we address that? How do you, as leaders in industry, manage that reality that exists today? And lastly, I think every generation has seen change. But what we're seeing today that's slightly different is the pace of that change. It's just constant. It's steady. It's accelerating, and that's just a reality that we're going to have to face as we digitize, as we sort of live in this very digital world with 250 emails a day and even as many texts to deal with. Not to mention, whatever feeds you're getting from Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it happens to be. The volume is there, the pace is there. How do we deal with it? At the same time, There are some technologies that can help, if applied correctly, at least. So I won't go through them all, but here you see, we talked a little bit about the cloud, and you'll see tons and tons of different content around that. We'll talk about industrial IoT, some of the advantages and efficiencies that can be gained through the mobile mobility and mobile workforce, and some of the training tools to solve that generational shift problem that we can find in virtual, augmented, or mixed reality kinds of platforms. Big data and analytics, you'll see quite a bit here over the next couple of days with respect to that, and all the time keeping in mind that cybersecurity is a real issue that as we deploy these systems, as we have hybrid systems between some on-prem, some in the cloud, some hybrid, a piece of each. How are we going to manage, especially with that critical infrastructure? How are we going to manage cybersecurity in doing so? So, what does all that mean? Market environment on one side, technology trends on the other, coming to bear against some very specific business imperatives right down the middle. I don't know if anyone in this room works in an environment where they don't have to worry about capital constraints. So how do we manage that? All great to come to a conference and talk about digital transformation, but if we're not mindful of the real life capital constraints that we have in our working organization, then how are we going to get there from here? And quite frankly, the answer 9 times out of 10 is that these kinds of initiatives have to be self-funding. We have to get ROI from the digital transformation, that solutions that we roll out, and then pay for the next one, and then pay for the next one. Compressed construction, engineering, and design cycles, that's just a reality. I'm building a new mine. I want to get to a point where I'm getting a return on that capital that I've invested. I need to get there as fast as I can, and that design cycle has to be compressed. It just has to be. We can't have this capital tied up for 5 years waiting to get first ore. Operational efficiency to drive profitability, asset reliability and availability, we've talked about that a little bit, performance management and decision support. What am I going to put in front of that employee who's only been with me for 2.5 years to help him make better decisions? The technology is certainly there, but how do we do that in an effective manner? And then last but not least, as we've talked about, workforce evolution and their capability. Okay, so when it comes to digital transformation, what we've really found over the last couple of years, really, but it's accelerated in the last year, is the first step in any digital transformation project, initiative, journey is in defining the digital business requirements that you, in your specific context, in your specific business have. And what we've found within those digital business requirements is really 4 main things that digitization can help deliver. First one, and you've seen it a lot, we saw a great presentation last year at this conference from the BlackRock mining people, AskMang, a new OMI-based integrated operations center. That's the kind of solution that drives greater visibility to how my operations are running. And not just a little bit here in that control room and a little bit there in that control room, and oh yeah, those guys over there in the mine, they don't really have anything to do with the control room. If we need them, we'll call them. Well, no, that's not good enough anymore. Now it's an integrated operations center where I can have visibility to all aspects of my value chain. That's what it's about. Transformation of work. It's not just good enough to give someone a mobile app on an iPhone, how are we actually going to change the work that they do and the way they do their work? So that has to be front and center and considered as we look at these business requirements. Common information and digitized process. So many organizations today have information spread across the whole enterprise. And maybe it was because this is the way we organized our business, this is the way our organizational structure has been set up, and the leaders in each of those different portions of our business, they make decisions to optimize what's going on in their silo of the organization. And so over a period of years, we end up with these silos of information. Well, how do we digitize an organization? How do we drive efficiency through an organization if it's all cut up in little pieces, both organizationally and informationally? And so that's kind of the starting point. Then we have visibility to everything across the value chain, not in little bits and pieces. And the little bits and pieces can't necessarily be manipulated or changed or modified without affecting the whole rest of the system. And then within that, digitizing the different ways we do work across it, the different processes that flow from one area of your organization to the next, so that we're not chasing around paper, we're not updating spreadsheets. We have something that's far more prevailing, far more ubiquitous. And then the last piece is really around what software tools can we use to not just visualize what our value chain is doing, but then actually contextualize it. How do we pull out those insights? What kinds of analytics are we going to use to help drive them, and then ultimately provide decision support to that person that's been there for 2.5 years, and help him make a better, more profitable, more efficient decision. So just to break this down a little bit and tie it to our 5 pillars, I guess. Greater visibility. I talked about common control rooms, remote operating centers, integrated operating centers. You may have seen, if you were here last year, sort of the mother of all integrated operating centers with a project called Panorama that was done by ADNOC in Abu Dhabi, where might not be realistic in your context to have an integrated operations center with a 50-meter long video wall that's 3 meters high. What do you do with that? It's pretty looking picture, kind of looks cool. What's in behind that is what really matters. They pulled together from across their organization 16 different operating companies, pulled all that information into one place. And yes, they did build a very impressive video wall around it, but once that data is pulled into one place, then we can run the analytics, then we can do the planning and scheduling, then we can do some of the predictive asset analytics. So while you might remember, oh yeah, I saw that ad hoc video or that ADNOC video a year ago, it's really more about that data layer underneath that was created, and now we keep adding more and more analytics, more and more insights, more and more decision support information, which starts with visibility. And on that whiz-bang screen, and we'll see examples, other examples of the same thing while we're here in this session over the next couple of days. We can see the engineering and design data. We can see real-time data. We can see management of change data. We can see energy management data. All kinds of different visualization tools to help make better decisions and drive greater profitability within your organization. I talked a little bit about planning and scheduling, but that's another area, a different type of analytic that we're doing all the time in both the oil and gas industry and in the mining industry, where we have sort of a unified planning and scheduling environment, a unified supply chain management solution, and within it, some very specific analytics to help optimize decisions around how to sequence different tasks to be the most effective and deliver the best outcome, whether it happens to be volume, whether it happens to be price, linked to inventory, and to make sure that we bring back the sort of conformance to schedule, and from the schedule conformance to the original plan that was built. So very difficult to do these kinds of things, again, if you don't have a view of the whole value chain, to be able to get the kind of benefits that this kind of advanced analytics can provide. Slightly different kind of analytics, in this case applied to critical assets, would be some of our predictive asset maintenance tools. So in this context, we have our assets, we have a number of sensors that are monitoring those assets, whether they're temperature, pressure, flow, vibration, a number of different signals on an asset. And historically, what we do is we collect all that information, we store it in a historian, we visualize it, in a graphical way, and then I have an operator who watches that trend and makes some decisions about what he sees in the trend. Well, sometimes with the, let's say, alarm deadband that exists, that isn't quite enough anymore, especially when the cost of downtime of some of those critical assets runs into the millions. So with a much more sophisticated machine learning model, we can take that same critical asset with those sensors and build a single model. We can look back through the history, the more the better, and we can find whenever there were little departures, not just in one signal, but in the relationship between many signals that make up the model. That's really what we're doing in terms of predictive analytics, and that's saving companies, like I said, millions on eliminating unplanned downtime. When it comes to common information and digital process, and really, again, David Bleakley is going to speak at some length about this in one of our later sessions, but here we have sort of an asset twin that's built at the time that your facility is designed. And by the way, don't worry if you think, well, I'm not building any greenfield plants, so I guess I can't participate in this because I can't use those design tools. Well, at the end of the day, whether you design your facility or have designed your facility in some of Aviva's tools or not, we still have the capability to take that information from its many different sources and help manage that engineering information. So this can apply as effectively to brownfield sites as it can to greenfield sites. And really, our view of it is to build a complete view of that asset, and that might include 1D documents, specifications, that kind of thing, some 2D piping diagrams, electrical single lines, different things like that, all the way up to 3D, the full 3D design model of your facility. So that forms the asset twin. You might think of it as sort of the mechanical version of the digital twin. But then up above, then we start to apply real-time data. we start to apply some of the simulation tools that we have. We start to analyze some of the data that we're collecting historically from how that asset is behaving. And in that context, then we're creating this operational twin that spawned from the asset twin in the first place. So again, think about that whole continuum and what it could mean to you and your business. And this isn't something that, we'll see in a year and see how that's going. No. I'm going to show you an example in a second where we are realizing this vision already today. So I'm going to run a little bit of a demo. I'm going to talk over it a little bit, but what I want to do is really show you the money, okay? What I have here is a 3D plant. So the highlighted, well-colored, well-defined portion of what you're looking at is a 3D model of a facility. And that sort of cryptic-looking gray thing in the front, that is a part of the plant that has just been scanned to add to the digital model that was fully in place before. And when you do a laser scan of your existing facility, while it gives you the outline and it gives you the relative positioning of one piece of equipment relative to the next, you get to pick how detailed the model is. You get to pick, which assets that are critical to in terms of placement and flow and those kinds of things. So that's why the two colors that are in place. Now, what I'm going to do then is visualize from an operations perspective an alarm. And in this case, I've pulled up all my alarms. There's one in particular, a major alarm. Looks like it's on a pump. So I'm going to zero in on that specific pump. I'm going to look at the touch of a button at a number of different artifacts that I have available on that pump, whether it was manufacturing specs, whether it was pump performance curves, what have you. And so I've got all that readily available at my fingertips. Now what I'm going to do is say, well, what's going on right now with that pump? So I have a number of signals that are associated with that pump, and I'm looking at them live from Wonderware Insight. So I'm looking at live information, real-time information in the context of that pump. I can also pull up the history of those same signals, and I can see that actually there's a vibration sensor that is the one that's tripped the alarm. So what am I going to do about it? Now, again, from the same environment, I'm pulling up a work order to basically dispatch someone to go investigate or go and remediate that particular problem. Aside from the pump itself, there are a number of other assets that surround it that I need to know in context. I have shut-off valves. I have another pump that happens to be tied into that same circuit. So I need that information to put together my work order, and even within that work order, the isolation information, so that I do this, so that I take that asset offline in a very safe way. So you can see right from the original 3D design of this asset all the way through to issuing work orders, issuing work permits, work safety, all visualized from one environment. And it did it that was about 30 seconds. So you can see the power that this can have and the change that it will drive in industry. In the past, many of you have worked in plants. I know I have. I would have spent a day pulling this together. I would have been going to find drawings in the engineering department. I'd probably had to make a trip out to the field just to see where it is and what things are around it. I would have had to cut a work order in our CMMS system. I mean, it literally would take a day to get this far, and I just did it in 30 seconds. This is the reality of a lot of different, I'd say, commercially available software applications. This is the reality that our young digital workers expect in the workplace, and now we're seeing an ability to deliver that. So we've talked about that next-gen worker. Let's zero in a little bit on some of the things that digitization can bring to workforce modernization. I've talked about engineering design and reducing engineering hours significantly with a multidisciplined environment where I don't have one system for the electrical team and another system for the mechanical team. And gee, I hope that all comes together at the end when I arrive at site. An integrated environment where everyone is pulling data out of the same basic system. And plugging it back into that same system as they work. From a training perspective, in this particular example, it's a virtual reality training simulator. But again, what we talked about before, we're reducing the training time, we're increasing the safety of your employees with maybe a little less experience than what they had in the previous generation, and we're increasing the productivity of each of those individuals. Standing here in an office, nice and safe, make as many mistakes as you like. He has his glasses on. He's manipulating a piece of equipment. Looks kind of funny, but at the end of the day, he's in front of a piece of switchgear, and he's making sure that it's safe before he opens the cabinet. So you can really see, this is the reality of what he's doing, and this is virtually what he's doing. And again, you probably see this technology in the expo next door. It's real, it exists, and it's an example of where we can go to help transform that work. Looking at it less from a training standpoint and more from an operations standpoint, we can take a similar version of that, we'll call it augmented reality, and in this case, help remediate a problem through you can imagine when I sent that work order, or cut that work order in the previous demo, when I cut that work order, what do I do with it? Well, I could send that work order through this mobility device, along with video content, along with sort of operating procedure, equipment, work instructions. All of those things are a reality today. And even more so, so I've been there for 2.5 years. I'm sitting there in front of a piece of equipment. I have some videos, I have some other things, but I'm really not that comfortable in how I'm going to take this next step, call in a remote expert from that same mobile device and get help. The remote expert can sort of zero in. He's looking at the same thing you are. Here's where I need you to focus. It's give me these readings, and then I'll walk you through the next step. So that person who's been in your organization for 30 years can be that remote expert and help a lot of those younger employees who are now out in the field. And that 30-year guy is doing it from the comfort of a remote operations center, or maybe he's in his pajamas in his living room. Who knows? But the fact of the matter is, you can leverage that person and his skills, his or her skills, for much more effectively for a longer period of time. Same thing. I talked about standard operating procedures and walking someone through maintenance activities. Actually overlaying information on what action to take, where to put the wrench, what direction to turn it. So all of these solutions are real today, all of them. And just to articulate as I close a little bit some success stories where companies like your own, companies like yours, have realized real tangible benefits from some of these solutions. This is a case with Duke Energy, one of the largest electrical generators in the United States. We'll call them the ESCOM of the U.S. They across their fleet, they generate just under 50 gigawatts of power, and across 90 different plants in 6 states. So a very broad fleet, I'd say. And across that fleet, they deployed our predictive analytics, and indeed flagged a nick on a turbine blade as they were starting up a unit, and in this case, that was one of a couple of different catches that they had. Just one second. Saving them something in the neighborhood of 45 million. That's 45 million in cost avoidance. They caught it before that whole unit was catastrophically destroyed. Here's an example, and while it was a greenfield mine that was built in Western Australia, here's an example where, working in conjunction with Schneider Electric, Aviva and Schneider Electric still have a very collaborative bond. Schneider is our largest customer. We worked within that team to deliver e-houses, electrical distribution equipment, medium voltage drives, and more importantly, a unified supply chain management solution. Again, that platform where all the data underlying the work process that they had on top of it, that was the critical part of the solution for Roy Hill. And indeed, the biggest value that they drove from this particular project was first ore on ship, reducing that time. It was originally supposed to be something like, well, from where we were engaged, 33 months. It was a debt-financed project, so time is money, and working in conjunction with our teams, able to put that solution in place to reduce that 32 months down to 24, and that translated into millions and millions of dollars in terms of interest. So that was the biggest tangible benefit. As they've now been in operation for 3 or 4 years, going back and redoing some of the things that they couldn't do at the time because they needed to get first ore on ship, to further optimize their not just their demand chain but also their supply chain, driving more and more efficiency through their operations over time. So I'm just going to kind of close with a couple comments on what we've learned over the last year around digital transformation and how to take that journey. First thing is find the value leaks, identify them and prioritize them, because that's the ROI that you're going to use to fund the digital transformation that your organization might embark upon. With each one of those value leaks, there's some associated business processes, so make sure that you keep those in mind. After all this, then determine what technology might best enable the value realization. In a lot of cases, people do this the wrong way around. They see some technology, they go, ooh, wow, that's pretty cool. Where can I apply that? Not the way to go. Figure out your value leaks, figure out your business problems, and then see what solution can satisfy that. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail, but I did find this quote the other day from Bill Gates, where he said, the first rule of any technology used in a business that is automated, or that automation applied to an efficient operation, will magnify its efficiency. The second is automation applied to an inefficient organization or operation will magnify the inefficiency. So that's where business process first, and then solve the problem. Apply automation second, and certainly work with different partners to develop that roadmap to get started, and then scale it up. And certainly most of our largest customers are very much at that scaling up stage now. We're not just doing little proof of concept type projects. Now we're seeing scale to 120 plants, scale to 200 plants, those kinds of things. So that brings us to the end of my discussion with you. I hope we turned on some light bulbs for you, and really, Aviva in its different forms, whether it was Wonderware, whether it was Schneider Electric Software, whether it is now Aviva, we've been here for the 27 years that Dion mentioned last night, and are proud to be partnered with IS Cubed. So with that, have a great couple of days. I look forward to meeting many of you in the different sessions that follow, and of course the events at night. So thank you very much, and have a great conference.